Arsenal has spent 150 million already. How much more does Arsenal need to compete for the league? Man City is investing heavily again. Will they become untouchable? Find out on this episode of the Football Rundown. Hey everyone, it's me Arnab again, here with Shan. Apologies for missing out on an episode last week. We had some technical issues on our side. Hopefully it will work out this time and we'll continue to provide you great content going forward. So how are you feeling, Shan?
Pretty excited, honestly. Been looking at the transfer windows this week, and it's going pretty crazy. There are some rumors that are actually, I think, might come true in a few weeks. There are a few surprises as well, but we're gonna get into it one by one. How was your week? What did you think about it so far? What do you think about the transfer?
It's been a very busy week in terms of transfers. There's so many rumors, so many players connected to so many different clubs. We'll try and cover as much as we can in this episode. I'm sure we'll miss out a lot, but we'll definitely come back and touch on those at a later time. There's only one place I would like to start, and that's Arsenal. I think they have made two big statement signings, especially when you consider the transfer values on both. Declan Rice obviously was coveted by majority of the Premier League teams. I know United were a big fan of Declan Rice for a while, and they've been following the player. City was definitely involved until pretty much the last minute, and Arsenal being able to get the deal over the line, I think, is a huge statement of intent, along with the fact that they have already secured Kai Havertz. They took two big signings, and I genuinely feel that definitely improves Arsenal.
We spoke about Havertz pretty much last time as well. I actually did like the signing. I think he's going to make a difference. I know that he hasn't been playing anywhere near to what he could actually do in Chelsea, but I think he's going to make a difference in Arsenal. With Arsenal, the squad's looking pretty good. What do you think about it? Do you think Arsenal needs more players?
Just before I get onto it, I think just going back to Havertz, I'll say what I said before is that, yes, he's definitely a quality player. No doubts about that. The only question marks I have is if he's going to get enough game time at Arsenal. I do see him as more of a rotation player, especially at the beginning, although a good run of games at a consistent position might help him, because I think in Chelsea, he was always pushed around different positions. He played, I think, right wing for a minute, and then he played through the middle for a bit. He was in the midfield for some games, and I don't think that inconsistency helped him at all. Going back to your question about what Arsenal needs, I think Arsenal was obviously very good last season. I think the only issues were injuries. And I think signing Declan Rice and Havertz definitely resolves some of those issues. There has been also links to Benjamin Henrichs and Jurrien Timber to sort of shore up the defense. I think those additions would obviously add depth to the team, especially Timber. I think that is definitely an upgrade. I genuinely think that he's a very good player. I know Man United was pretty close to signing him last time, and then they until when they went and got Martinez. But overall, I think those are good signings. The only question mark is obviously Gabriel Jesus did very well for Arsenal, especially in the early parts of the season, but then he got injured, and it feels like once one of the starting 11 from the Arsenal team has an injury, they don't have genuine backups. Obviously, with Rice and Havertz, they're covering the midfield pretty much. But if once again Jesus have an injury, then that can become a spot that is weaker. But saying that, they have already spent 150 million. I don't know how much more budget they have, because if they go on and get Henrichs and Timber both, I think Henrichs is about 40 million. I think that's the number that's been thrown around. I would imagine Timber would be at least 50 million, if not more. That's pushing it over 250 or close to 250 already. I don't know if they have the budget to get strike, especially in this transfer window, because there's a lot of other clubs who are also looking for strikers, and there's a lot of competition for strikers. So given where they are and the sort of business they have done already, I think Arsenal has definitely improved, and that they have almost, at least at the start of the season, they would go in confident that they'll get close and they'll maintain that level of performance that they have shown last season. It's just time will tell if they will essentially go and beat Man City this time.
I agree with you. I was gonna go into the same thing as well. So I genuinely think with the new signings, and if they actually can get Hendricks and Timber, the squad depth will be something to look forward to, and they will bring something more to the table. And I was gonna say the same thing, that if Arsenal can keep up what they did last season, at least for the first half of the season, they'll actually pretty much challenge City. I'm not saying they're on the same level as City, but they definitely have the talent, and the manager is absolutely. I love Arteta, and I'm pretty sure he's going to do something really good this coming season. I have a good feeling about it.
No, that's definitely true. I think the club itself, even the owners, definitely have shown ambition and trust in Arteta. Because he's getting definitely backed to go and get the players that he wants to go back and fight and sort of compete at the top end of the table. Moving on, obviously, we can only stop at Man City. They've definitely had a great season last season. I don't think anyone can argue that anything that they have won last season was undeserved. They have been a fantastic team. Saying that, they've already got Kovacic over the line. I mean, Kovacic will most probably be a squad player, but they're already linked to Gvardiol, and that will be a big money signing. I think that'll be a record signing for a defender if it goes over the line, because I think the fee that's been quoted is around 86 million. They're already looking at alternative for Declan Rice in Gabri Veiga. I just saw a news article today as well where they're also linked to Frenkie de Jong, although the fee seems to be quite high at 90 million, but I don't know if that is how true it is and how realistic it is. But saying that, if they get Kovacic, Gvardiol, and Veiga, that's a big addition to the team, which is already very strong. And I mean, their squad depth is, at this point, in my opinion, unparalleled. So if they add more to it, I don't know. I almost feel like they're becoming untouchable to an extent. I know they have lost Gundogan, so obviously they would need to get one more player in that place. And Gundogan obviously is a big loss. But then again, I don't think that weakens them enough for others to really compete.
Yeah, that's what surprises me. I'm very surprised of how Man City are pulling. Yeah, I know that Gundogan left. That they're pulling the similar quality, similar sort of players back in. So basically, even if a French player doesn't want to be on the bench and leaves the club, they're bringing in, like, for example, Kovacic. He's a brilliant player. I know he played under the supervision of Modric at one time in Real Madrid, and I've seen him play. He's incredible. Even at Chelsea, he was really good. I don't know why Chelsea couldn't actually bring out his potential, but I believe he has much more to offer than what he shown in Chelsea. On top of that, I am actually looking forward about it. Like, I'm pretty surprised on how City are actually bringing in those kind of players, and I'm pretty sure they're going to do that in the next few seasons as well. Given that the trophies they're won, they're actually making new history right now. Players will be much more obliged to go there. They will be much more interested and motivated to be in a team like that.
Obviously, I think every player wants to join City right now. I mean, it's almost guaranteed winning trophies. So I understand the pull towards joining City, and that's obviously making things easier for City to go and get players. Saying that, I actually did not think City needed to bolster their defense, but it seems like they're quite focused in that area. So essentially, the targets seem to be more defensive midfield. and defenders, which honestly surprised me. But then again, in all honesty, City's team is pretty strong in all departments. I mean, even getting 100 million Gvardiol, I don't know if that really improves the team, because I don't know how much better City can get at this point, which is really scary. I mean, as much as I do like watching the City team, I don't want to see a league or Champions League where it becomes very predictable because of one team. That's my biggest worry. But other than that, look, kudos to City. They are doing really well, and it might be essentially the last bit of transfers that Pep might guide through, because by the time next summer rolls around, Pep will have about a year left on his contract, and at that point, City might want to sort of plan for the future. It'll be very interesting. It'll be very interesting to see what happens to this team and who else comes through the door by the end of it. There is obviously talks of Bernardo Silva leaving if there is a genuine offer, which might also mean that they go and get some more attacking players. I think we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, City already, if they can get Kovacic and Gvardiol, I think that's a good enough transfer window for them, because they don't really need to do much. Getting Vega, that's more of a sort of long-term project, I feel, because he's only 21 years old. A very young player, a lot of potential. So once again, would be a pretty good signing if they get it.
Speaking of really good signing, I think Man United actually got someone really good. Mason Mount to Manchester United. I think that was a really good transfer, and I believe it will pay off next season.
He's a good player. He's definitely a good player, especially I think he had that one season where he almost scored 17 or 18 goals plus a whole bunch of assists. But I am not completely convinced on Mason Mount yet. I do understand that United needs to bolster their midfield, especially with Eriksen losing his legs. Fred and McTominay, I don't think they can be starters consistently, or they have the quality to be starters consistently. But I would have preferred someone who could also play as a backup to Casemiro, because I think you need to think of a replacement for Casemiro soon enough. Otherwise, they'll end up in the same position they were before Casemiro arrived. Plus, I think there is a lot more urgency to get a striker, and now with everything that's happening with De Gea, to get a goalkeeper. So, although it's a good signing, I agree with you on Mason Mount, but I think there were bigger problems that Man United needs to address.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. But at the same time, I do believe that Ten Hag has the ability to actually bring out the best out of Mason Mount. In terms of Casemiro, he's 32, isn't it? And I think he's still got like a few years to go, a few years in his legs as well. I'm not really sure how United can actually get a replacement for him at this stage, given that the shortage of players and all. But at the same time, with De Gea, this is something that actually concerns me. And I was talking to you before the show as well. That's something that surprised me, how the whole thing turned out with De Gea's contract, and United searching for another keeper. And it's just in shambles in regards to the goalkeeping position.
Absolutely. It just shows how unplanned Man United is at this stage. And this seems to be the theme every transfer window for the last however many years. De Gea's one was definitely very strange. I think he was initially offered a contract, which he signed, and then Man United backed out of that, and then offered him another one at a lower wage, which is very weird. I understand. I don't think Ten Hag is convinced with De Gea. Obviously, his ball-playing ability is not up to the standard that Ten Hag wants. Plus, in the latter half of the season, De Gea had a few mistakes, which might have also made Ten Hag question his shot-stopping abilities as well. Onana obviously would be an upgrade, but I think the £50 million valuation that Inter has, and I understand he's a good goalkeeper, and good goalkeeper these days go for a premium. That might put Man United off because their budget is quite restricted due to financial fair play. And based on that, I think the current status with De Gea is that United will have a chat with De Gea once he is back in England, and then decide, or basically try and come to a resolution to his contract situation. It's very, very weird and messy, to be really honest. I don't understand what's happening. It's the same with Dean Henderson. I thought by now he would be sold, and Man United would at least cash in on him and get some funds into the transfer budget. But everything seems to be very messy and complicated with Man United these days.
Well, given that what has happened with De Gea, or what we assume has happened, do you really think De Gea would consider playing for United, signing a contract?
I'm not sure. A pay cut in the first place, I don't think he had a huge issue with that, and I think he was open to that. But at this point, obviously, De Gea also would know that he doesn't have a long-term future at United. It might be for another year, 2 years, and after that, United will eventually get another keeper, and he will have to sit on the bench for the majority of the season, which definitely puts De Gea in a position where he might not be willing to continue, especially now that he can leave on a free. Saying that, it's also true that there is not a lot of demand for De Gea currently. I can't see him going to another big club right now.
I'll stop you right there. Any player who doesn't have a club to go to, there's always Saudi Arabia League.
That's very true. I mean, if he's after the wages, yes, definitely one last hurrah. Why not? Did you hear that Gerrard's now managing a Saudi club?
Yeah, I just saw it today in the morning. I was pretty surprised, because I thought he was actually, he was coaching in England, right?
He was in Aston Villa, but then he got fired from Aston Villa. But he hasn't had a club since then. But that's very left field.
Exactly, that's my point as well. I would think that Gerrard would go back to England, or maybe in Spain as well, Villarreal or Sevilla.
Yeah, and look, I actually thought he'd go back to Scotland, because I think he did a good job in the Scottish Premier League. So I thought he would go back to Scotland and try and do it again and slowly come back. But yeah, anyways, going back to Man United. Onana obviously is a good keeper. Like I said, I think the budgets don't work out, and I think this is where the Mason Mount transfer has been good, but has tied Man United's hands a bit, is because now that they have already spent 50 million on Mason Mount, and if they spend another 50 on Onana, that's 100 mil. I think their total budget is about 120, and they still need to get a striker for sure, and maybe a defender. In an ideal scenario, if money was not an issue, or if they could get whoever they wanted, I think they would want at least 5. I think they would want a striker, a couple of midfielders, a defender, and then a goalkeeper. But given the budgets, I don't think that's realistic.
It certainly will put a bit of pressure on United. I understand that due to financial issues, they might not be able to do what it takes to strengthen the squad from the depth. But at the same time, there are always options to loan players. I know that you don't actually get really good players on loans.
But
yeah, I mean, you can't do anything much right now. At the end of the day, the only thing is that Man United have to look forward to is if the owners sell the club, then the new owners will definitely pitch in a lot more funds to get new players. And at that point, I can see the club completely ramping up with new players, getting rid of all the old players, and getting there will be a lot of changes once it happens. And I think that is the point where United will literally take advantage of every single thing and push to be where they actually belong.
Well, the takeover is just another shambles. I don't think there has been an update for the last week or 2 weeks now. So I don't know where that's going. There hasn't been any noise on the takeover recently, so I think Glazers is still undecided, I'm assuming. And I have a feeling that by the time there is a resolution to the takeover, the whole transfer window might pass at this rate. Which will be very, very disappointing and sad, but then that's what might happen. Going on to the other transfers for Man United, Man United also wants to sell Maguire. Maguire, I am actually not sure why Maguire's not leaving, or he's not showing any urgency to leave, because essentially he's still the England captain and he's still playing pretty regularly in England. But given that the Euros are next year, at the end of next season, if he doesn't play regularly, and I don't think he'll play regularly at United, isn't there a risk for him to lose his spot in the England team? Because, I mean, yes, he might have to take sort of a step down in terms of going from Man United to something like a West Ham or something like that. But even then, if he plays regularly, there's a better chance for him to end up in the national team rather than sitting on the bench at Man United.
Well, with Maguire, things are a bit different in my head and how it plays. Like, I know that you're saying, I know what you're saying, that if he doesn't actually play, he might miss out on the next Euros and all. But at the same time, unfortunately, he's got a bit of a reputation after all the seasons that he had, the terrible mistakes that he did. At this point, I don't think a lot of clubs are really excited to have him. And at the same time, I do believe that he has lacked that ambition, that motivation, or even that self-belief that he's actually good. I think that that lack of motivation does not actually let him, push forward to push a transfer away and all. At the same time, I'm pretty sure he's already up for sale, and no club is actually going forward or contacting United over it.
No, I don't think there's. Well, he's essentially up for sale. I think United has quoted about 40 million for Maguire. I think like going to the reputation bit, I think that's more internet buzz and fans who would go and create that picture. But from a reality perspective, from a tactical perspective, I think Maguire does well in a low block system where the team's playing on counter-attack. Obviously, Ten Hag doesn't want to do that. Where I think that's where Maguire doesn't work at all. I don't think he's a bad defender. I think he's a decent defender, but he obviously he lacks pace, and as a result, he can't work in a team where they want to play a high line. Saying that, I think the current decision is to have a chat with him once everyone gets back to training, and I think Ten Hag is going to have a chat with him, which I would assume would be something in the lines of, you are not going to play most of games. You might come in for the last 5 minutes here and there, maybe play the League Cup or something. If you're okay with that, hang around. If not, then maybe it's time for you to go and find a club. I think that's what's happening. In other sales, I think United is willing to sell Fred. I think there is a bit of interest in Fred, especially I think the price tag that United has quoted it's sort of a budget thing. I think they have quoted about 20 million, which is not much in these days. United is also willing to sell Martial and Sancho. which makes sense. I think they need to clear up some budget to get a striker, and they definitely need a striker. I don't think you can rely on Rashford to have that same form again, especially playing to the middle when you don't have another striker in the team. And Martial definitely does not work. Going on to strikers, I think Kane and Osimhen, or strikers of that ilk, are definitely out of Man United's budget this time. I think the two players that are being strongly linked to Man United is Kolo Muani and Rasmus Højlund. I genuinely can't see how Man United affords Muani, because I think the price tag's close to 100 mil or like 90 mil or something. They just don't have the money, so I don't know how that's being touted. Højlund, honestly speaking, I haven't seen a lot of him. I've just seen YouTube clips and here and there. To me, looking back at a few games, he's very up and down with his performances, which is expected. He's 20, so you expect that sort of inconsistency in the game. And I feel that he's a bit too raw. Even for Atalanta, he hasn't really been a starter. He's played games here and there. He has played a decent number of games, but he's definitely not the number one choice there either. And the prices that have been quoted so far is around 60 or 70 million, which I feel like is a bit too much of a gamble given how tight the budgets are. Although saying that, I don't see a lot of other options for United to get a striker unless they want to go for, someone from Premier League, maybe someone from a smaller team just to fill in the gap. Someone like maybe Calvert-Lewin or something, although Calvert-Lewin would cost a lot of money as well.
Yeah, I think this transfer window, there's a lot of restrictions. I haven't, till now, I'm not seeing any big budget transfers. And part of that reason, I think, is why Harry Kane's still in Tottenham. He still didn't get transferred. That's a big miss from United, honestly. I could actually see Kane playing for United and doing a great job there. I know on our last episode we were talking about if there's a very big chance of Kane possibly ending up in Madrid. But, during the last 1 week, there were a lot of rumors about Mbappe trying to force a leave, or PSG owners trying to push him to sell. And I think at that point, Madrid actually lost interest in Kane and they started to go after Mbappe instead. Saying that, obviously, Tottenham will not let go of Kane that easy. So there's a lot of issues going on in terms of his price tag. And I know if United had the budget, United could actually afford him, could actually get him and actually work with him. Ten Hag would be happy to have a striker like him. And given that the shortage of strikers and the quality of strikers these days, he would be an absolutely gem to have in the team. And I think he is actually moving to Bayern, if I'm not wrong.
I agree with everything that you said there. I know Ten Hag highly rates Kane, and Kane was a priority target for Man United. But I think it was quite clear pretty early that Spurs is not willing to negotiate with Man United or any English team for Kane, which is understandable. They don't want their strongest player to go to a rival. Saying that Kane's link to Bayern has been building, but I think there was a 70 million euro bid that was rejected by Spurs. I think Bayern is now, or I have heard rumors that Bayern is now planning for a second bid, which will be around 90 million euros. I think that's a good move for Kane. But once again, I don't think it's the budget issues for Kane that's stopping his transfer. It's more Spurs being Spurs, rather Danny Levy being Danny Levy and trying to stop Kane from leaving. Kane might have to end up staying at Spurs if this continues, because by the sounds of it, Danny Levy is pretty adamant that he does not want to sell Kane. He'd rather have him leave on a free next year, because I think that's the only chance of genuinely getting into Europe next year. Obviously, if they sell Kane, it's hard to replace 30 goals with any sort of budget, especially for a team who's currently not in Champions League. It's very hard to find a striker of the same quality.
Exactly. And I know there were a few rumors about Richarlison, but I don't think he's going anywhere. What do you think?
Well, Richarlison, I don't really rate him much anyways. I think he's good for a mid-table team, but then even when Tottenham bought him, I did not see it a very smart transfer, to be honest. Moving on, let's talk about Liverpool for a bit. Obviously, they had a pretty substandard season, but they seem to have put their ducks in a row and started the transfer window pretty strong. Obviously, they had McAllister done pretty early, and I think that's a very good signing. Gives Liverpool a lot of energy in midfield, and also a player who can score goals from the midfield, which obviously Liverpool, even when they won the league or the Champions League, they lacked goals from the midfield. The midfield at that point was more to supply the front three than scoring goals themselves. They're obviously very close to, or have they already completed the transfer of Szoboszlai? I think that's another great player and a great addition to the Liverpool team. I think that'll give Liverpool's midfield a lot of legs and allow Liverpool to once again play with the intensity that Klopp has been known for and has implemented since he moved to Liverpool, well, barring last season, obviously. What are your thoughts?
With Liverpool, I do have a very strange feeling. For some reason, I can't get off this feeling that Liverpool will not actually do much this season. And as a result, Klopp might leave the club. That's my thought on it. I know that they're getting... I know that what you said, I agree to it. But at the same time, there's this feeling that's actually gutting me that Liverpool will not do much this season.
Well, we can add a bold predictions section to our podcast, and that can definitely go into bold predictions. I don't know. I feel like last season was a blip. It was a big blip, but a blip. They'll be much stronger this season, without a doubt. I feel.
But at the same time, if you actually look at Klopp's previous records, whenever he hits a blip, he could not recover from it.
That's true, but then I think in both occasions, previous Liverpool, he's left the season that the team performed poorly. I think the thing that's pushing me towards thinking that Liverpool will have a good season is obviously last season they had a few injuries, especially the injury to Luis Diaz and Jota was, I think, that hampered them significantly, especially given the fact that the midfield was aging and they didn't have the legs to run around with the intensity anymore. Now that they're addressing that issue, obviously Darwin Núñez has had a season under his belt in the Premier League now. I expect him to improve. Obviously, he didn't have the best of the starts, but I think that might give Liverpool more of a chance to push. Although I don't think they will compete with City to the extent that they have previously. I feel the gap has widened over the last few years, but I definitely think they'll finish in the top four.
As I'm saying, I'm against that. I don't think Liverpool will, but then again, it's a very long season, so a lot of things can change.
Of course, I mean these are very early predictions or early thoughts. I mean, the top four race next season will be very interesting. I mean, you can expect Man City and Arsenal to be up there again. I don't see either of them faltering, but the competition for the other two places is will be very, very tough, especially given Liverpool bolstering their squad, Newcastle continuing on their good run and sort of adding to their team already. Chelsea with Pochettino might come back up, or you expect them to come back up because they have quality players. And if Pochettino can sort of streamline the team, especially because they don't have any European distraction at all. I mean, most of the teams they compete or they will be competing against will play midweek games, either in Champions League or Europa League, whereas obviously Chelsea doesn't have either of them, so they'll be much fresher and have more time to train and sort of the tactical side of the game. It will be very, very tight for the top four next season, without a doubt. Saying that, let's move on to Newcastle for a bit. So, Tonali to Newcastle. That, honestly speaking, I mean, the new rumors have been going on for a bit, but that took me by a surprise in two senses. Number one is obviously they already had Guimaraes, who did pretty well in a defensive position. Getting another defensive midfielder, I didn't expect them to bolster there first. Secondly, I genuinely rate Tonali quite highly. I think he's a very good young player and has a lot of potential. I'm surprised that no one else was competing for Tonali. I would have expected a few other teams to be in there.
You do see a lot of players like that when teams actually do not chase them. It's one of those situations where Newcastle has taken really good advantage of it, and obviously he's a great player. And speaking of Newcastle, I know I've told you before as well in the previous episodes that I was actually waiting for Newcastle to do some really good transfers this season. So, saying that I'm still waiting on it. I can just see one transfer happening, but I'm still waiting for the good ones. Last week I was watching Goal 1, and I was watching Newcastle, and then I got to the point where like, hey, Newcastle definitely needs some good player like Santiago Munez.
Absolutely. I think Newcastle will end up getting a few more to the door. It's very early in the transfer window, although most teams will start going onto the preseason tours very soon. But saying that, I think Newcastle is taking a very cautious approach, and they don't want to throw money right, left, and centre. They'd rather sort of pick the players that they think will genuinely improve them. I think, obviously, Eddie Howe has done pretty good with the team, and I think he has a certain vision for the team, and he's slowly trying to pick the players that he thinks will fit into his system, fit into the way that they want to play, and especially given how last season has gone. I mean, you have to give it to the players that, from an attitude perspective, they have been fantastic. Like all of them, the whole squad have been fantastic, and I don't think Eddie Howe wants to risk bringing in big names and upsetting the harmony that they have going right now. So, which makes sense. I think that's a very considered approach, and that might actually help them to build the team for the long term. I mean, obviously, Newcastle, I think, is ahead of what they initially assumed or predicted to achieve, because I don't think they expected to get into the Champions League this season. I genuinely think that they thought they would eventually get there, maybe in 2 or 3 years, but obviously that has come much sooner. That happening has not changed their philosophy so far, which is good to see, which is definitely good to see. Moving on to other big news, obviously Gundogan to Barcelona. That's a big transfer from both sides, I think. Obviously, City, like we mentioned, losing Gundogan is a loss for City, I believe. Gundogan has been the captain for the last part of the season, or the entirety of the season. And he has contributed heavily to their treble, scored important goals throughout the season and throughout his time at City. But for for Barcelona to get Gundogan, I think that's a big plus for them. I think Barcelona's midfield has been pretty good, at least for La Liga. I think they had the best midfield, at least in my opinion, in La Liga last season. And adding Gundogan to that only makes them stronger.
No, absolutely. I personally love Gundogan, and I love the qualities that he has, his technical abilities as well. I was a bit surprised why Pep let him go this season. I thought he would still hang around for like one more season. Saying that, I know it's a really good transfer for Barcelona, but I don't see it as a long-term plan. Because if you look into the Barcelona squad, most of the squad members are around 20 plus, right? There are hardly anyone except for Lewandowski above 27 or 28. At the same time, if you look into Gundogan, maybe he has like 2 years at max at his peak. The kind of player he is, the kind of abilities that he possesses, I don't see him adding a great depth of value or something for the long term to the club. It might be a good foundation for Xavi to move around stuff and build something, build the formation, build the midfield a bit more stronger. And then, after 2 years, when the time comes, if Barcelona has the funding, they will get more players to it.
I think for Gundogan, I think the rationale that Barcelona must have had is that obviously, like you said, most of the players are quite young. Their average age is pretty low, which is why I think Gundogan is a good signing for Barcelona, is because he brings a bit of experience that obviously the current lot of players at Barcelona doesn't really have. I mean, barring Frankie de Jong, I mean, he's young, but then he's been around for a while now. And plus that winning mentality that Gundogan brings, because he's won everything that you can win. So I think it's a good mixture. I think he can obviously, like you said, perform for the next couple of years. But beyond that, he can also guide the likes of Gabi and Pedri. So I generally believe that's a very good signing for Barcelona, especially knowing how Barcelona usually goes for high-price attacking players, and especially given that now Busquets has retired. He's been a phenomenal player, obviously, over the years, and a huge influence, I would imagine, in the dressing room. Once you lose someone like that, just to replace not just the playing ability, but more than the experience and the sort of leadership that he brought, I think that's a good replacement to Busquets.
No, you're absolutely right on that. Busquets, hats off to him. He has been an absolutely legend of a player, both for Barcelona and Spain as well. And yeah, kind of see like how Busquets going and Gundogan's arrival. I can see that connection, because obviously you need a team leader. And quite frankly, Frankie de Jong does not actually possess the ability to be a leader in the team. And I think Gundogan can fill in that void pretty well. What do you think? What do you think Barcelona's going to go for next?
Barcelona definitely needs a lot more if they especially want to compete in the Champions League. I think for La Liga, they have a decent team, but I would like them to start looking for a replacement for Lewandowski, because obviously he's getting to the age where he might not be able to continue to play at the same level every game. You might need to take him off on certain games. So saying that they might want to get someone who's like a younger striker who can sort of play as an understudy for the next year, maybe a couple of years with Lewandowski, and as Lewandowski sort of gets older and he retires, they can sort of go and play in his place. The other place I think Barcelona definitely needs to improve is the defense. I think the defense is quite shaky still. There might be some tactical changes that Xavi might need to make it a bit more stable, but as it is, I think they need a few upgrades in the defense. Those are the two places I would basically go. I think their midfield is pretty set. They're pretty good with their midfield, especially from a creating perspective. I don't see much of an issue. Obviously, since Xavi has become the manager, I feel like Ansu Fati's progression has stopped a bit. He has sort of flatlined. The early promise or potential that he's shown hasn't come to fruition. But then again, it might be just a one season thing because he's still very young. You expect him to have inconsistencies in his game. So all of those combined, I think if I was in Barcelona's shoes, I would go for a defender and maybe a striker. On that note, we'll finish off here. Join us next week when we discuss all the major topics on and off the pitch. Please like and subscribe, and do not forget to leave us a comment. We'll really appreciate to hear from you.